We're going to take this. Here's what we're going to do. One of you are going to take one end. We got to get the telephone unscrambled, right? Because it doesn't work if the line's messed up, right? So we get the telephone line unscrambled, maybe. Oh no! Maybe. Oh no. All right. So we get the telephone line unscrambled. There we go. We'll get the telephone line unscrambled. Here's what we're going to do. One of y'all is going to stay here with me. Two of y'all are going to take the other end of the telephone, and we're going to see if you can decipher the message over the telephone. Make sense? So who wants to be the one person that stays on this end of the telephone? All right, here we go. And so y'all see, here's what y'all going to do. Take this end, and you see right on the other side of that piano over there, I want y'all to go sit down over there. Take it with you. Go. Wait, I'm going to give you one more thing. Who wants the note card? Who wants the pen? All right, you sit on this side. All right, so y'all go down there, and then that was to take the cord with you. All right, here's what we're going to do. Here's what's going to happen. I have a Bible verse that I'm going to give you one word at a time. First off, shall we test it first? So make sure that the line is really taut. So you go to the other end of the piano. Yeah, so make sure it's got to be tight. It's got to be in the air. There you go. All right. So, Micah, put it up to your ear. Mason, talk and say something to Micah. Say hello. Do you hear that? Yeah. All right. So you're not going to scream it, but you're going to talk into the door. All right. Y'all are going to take turns. All right. So here's what's going to happen. I have a super secret message in my book, right? I'm not going to tell y'all my super secret message. Sorry, I'm only going to tell this team over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up the super secret message. And what's going to happen is that he's going to say it one word at a time. So after each word, what do you think y'all are going to do? You're going to be listening, but after each word, what do you think y'all are going to do? You're going to switch. So whoever has the cup is going to be listening, and whoever doesn't have the cup is going to have what? The pen and paper, and you're going to be writing it down. Right? So, are y'all ready? All right. So, one word at a time. All right, this is the next one. The next one. Only a few more words left. Is this what they had to do a long time ago? Yeah, this is what they had to do a long time ago, back in the day. Alright, here's the next one. Get it? Say it again. Spell it for me. You gotta pull it tight. Pull it really tight. Get it? Write it down. Alright. 4 more words left. Get it? Only 3 more words left. Pull it tight, pull it tight, pull it tight. Get it? Listen, put your all the way to your ear.
He has a hand on the screen.
I took your hand on the screen. There you go. Get it?
I got it.
All right, 2 more words, 2 more You did it?
Is that mine?
Alright, go to the next one. Alright, here's the second to last word.
B.
Hold it tight, hold it tight.
B.
Get it? Alright. There's the last word. Last word.
Steve.
Did you get it?
Steve. Sanders. No, no. That's murder.
Alright, one more time.
Steve.
Okay, write it down. Alright, once you get it written down, bring your cup back over here. Let's see what y'all got. Alright, bring the cup. Give them a round of applause. Something to go. Let me see what you got. If you, that is, you be saved. Not too shabby. You want to know what it actually says? If you confess that Jesus is Lord, you will be saved. Now, all right, y'all have seen, was that hard? Did you get that message based off of that? Absolutely not. So wait a second, let's talk about this for a second. That was really hard, wasn't it? Can you imagine if you had to talk to people like that all the time? How frustrated would you get? Very, very frustrated, right? But wait a second. What would have been easier? Who was the person that had the message? Yeah, exactly. What would have been easier to get the message to you guys? Walking over and bringing it where? To over here, because where was the message located at? It was there, right? But the thing is, boys and girls, a lot of times, that's how we tell people about Jesus, right? We try to tell people about Jesus from a distance. We try to tell people about Jesus, maybe for adults, over social media. Maybe in your classrooms, you try to tell them by just being a good student. Maybe when you're on the playground, you just try to play nice, and that's how you tell people about Jesus. The thing is, boys and girls, what's the best way of actually going and telling somebody about Jesus? Going and bringing them where? Say again? To Jesus, exactly. So you can go and tell them, but the thing is, what's the place where we talk about Jesus? That's the one thing we do. We worship Jesus, that's the one thing we do. We celebrate Jesus, that's the one thing we do. We play games centered around Jesus, that's the one thing we do. We eat snacks when we're talking about Jesus. Yeah, eat snacks in there, right? What's the place where we do all those different things? Church. Yeah, exactly. The building is church too, isn't it? The whole building is church, but the thing is, the building is not just the church. The building really isn't church. What's the church? People sitting next to you, right? The people behind them. So which one's easier? Trying to reach people from a distance, or going and doing what? Telling them, and not only just telling them, grabbing them and bringing them where? To Jesus, but really, where do we do all those things about Jesus? Church, right? So a lot of times, boys and girls, here's what we do. We have a message. The message isn't in this book, is it? No. The message is in this book. And a lot of times what we do, what we're going to talk about today, is that we try to play telephone. Exactly. So you bring the message to them, but can I read you one passage where Jesus does this and someone else does that? Jesus says, the disciples came back, they marveled what he was talking with the woman, but no one said, what do you see? Or what are you talking about? But Jesus was telling the woman about himself. But the woman, when she had met Jesus, guess what she did? She went back home. And she said, come, see a man who told me everything that I had ever done. She said, come and see Jesus. So she just tell people about Jesus? You know, what did she do? She brought people to where Jesus was. And we can do the same thing when we bring people to church. So here's what I want to pray for. Pray that your friends in school, not only you can tell them about Jesus where you go, but you can bring them here. And they can learn about Jesus, not just when you're with them, here at church. So that we're not playing telephone with them and trying to go back and forth, because that gets hard, doesn't it? But we can bring them to the source. Can I pray for that? God, thank you for these kids. Thank you for your love. I ask that you would be with them as they're in their schools, as they're around their friends. I ask that you would help them, guide them, comfort them, so that when they go to their friends, they can tell them about Jesus, but that also they can bring them here so that they can learn even more about Jesus too. Thank you so much for that, Jesus, that we get a place where we can bring people to come and see, and that they can bring their friends here. They can be friends in school, they can also be friends here too. God, thank you so much for your love that makes it all possible. I pray this in your precious, holy, and wonderful name. Amen. Huh? All right, God, we'll kiss you.
The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Philip was from the town of Bethsaida. So were Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one whom Moses wrote about in the law. The prophets also wrote about him. He is Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth, can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip.
Thank you, President. Thank you. We are truly called to be God's people and invite people to church, to tell people about Jesus. We're going to sing a song you may or may not be familiar with. It's a beautiful song called "We Are Called to Be God's People." If you will, stand and sing. Thank you, ladies.
We will shout.
praise, for great is thy faithfulness. We will remember, we will remember, we will remember the works of your hand. We will stop and give you praise, for great is thy faithfulness. You're our creator, our life sustainer, deliverer, our comfort, our joy. Throughout the ages, you've been our shelter, our peace in the midst of the storm. With signs and wonders, you've shown your power. Your precious blood, you shown us your grace. You've been our helper, our liberator, the giver of life and we will remember, we will remember, we will remember the works of your hands. We will stop and give you praise, for great is thy faithfulness. When we walk through life's darkest valleys, we will look back at all you have done, and we will shout, our God is good, and He is the faithful one. Hallelujah, hallelujah, to the one from whom all blessings flow. Hallelujah, hallelujah, to the one whose glory has been shown. We will remember, we will remember, we will remember the works of your hands. We will stop and give you praise, for great is thy faithfulness. I shall remember the day you saved me, the day I heard you call out my name. You said you love me, would never leave me, and I've never been the same. We will remember, we will remember, we will remember the works of your hands. We will stop and give you praise, for great is thy faithfulness. We will remember, we will remember, we will remember the works of your hands. We will stop and give you praise, for great is thy faithfulness. Thy faithfulness.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You will remember that. That's a, oh, you can't see Wes's face from where I'm sitting, but man, he was worshiping. It's cool to see somebody worship. Well, have you ever been to Allen Fieldhouse? Maybe you don't even know what Allen Fieldhouse is. That's okay. Not everyone's enlightened, save time. Those of us who walk the path, all right, let's teach those who get to walk. Okay. Sort of. The Allen Fieldhouse, named after famous coach Forrest Fogg Allen, is where Kansas Jayhawk basketball plays and has been since 1955. No less an authority than Wikipedia, or the big guns here, calls it, one of college basketball's most historically significant and prestigious buildings. The actual playing surface where the games happen is the James Naismith Court, who was, of course, the inventor of the sport and the first head coach for the men's basketball team there in Kansas. His original rules of basketball, the little book he wrote it down, is actually there in the field house on display for you to see. When it comes to college basketball, and apologies to fans of anybody else, there simply isn't a better place to play. I will stand firmly on that truth right here. Now, if we live close enough, and I was trying to convince you to be a Kansas fan, granted, if we live close enough, you can already be a Kansas fan, it's distance that causes things like this. I tell you to come and see a game, and then you don't. If you're interested in connecting with the Kansas basketball nation, incidentally, there's not a Kansas football nation because people like to cheer for a team that finishes above 500 more than once a generation. So there's just a Kansas basketball nation. That come and see invitation, that'll make all the difference. I made that invitation to you because I've gone and I've seen, and I know that if you go too, you'll experience what I did. It's just how it works. It's a magic place. Well, this morning we are starting a brand new series together called A Fresh Look. For the next 4 weeks, we are going to be talking about who God has made us as a church to be. Now, as far as the basic idea of our identity goes, I hope it's something that sounds at least a little familiar to you. God has designed First Baptist Oakboro to be a people with whom anyone can connect, to grow in Christ, and reach out for His kingdom. If that idea does sound a little bit familiar, thank you for paying attention. That's when I first walk up to this podium every week. That's about the first or second sentence that I say to you is a welcome. And I'll just tell you straight out, my goal for that phrase is to so deeply penetrate your hearts and minds with it that anytime you hear the title First Baptist Oakboro, you immediately think it's a place where anyone can connect, and people with whom anyone can connect to grow in Christ and reach out for His kingdom. That's who God has designed us as a church to be for the present season. And I want for all of us to be abundantly clear on that fact. And I want this not simply so that you have an idea to call to mind when you're thinking about the church. I want it because if you are a part of this church, if you're even just thinking about becoming a part of this church, I want you to know what you're in for. I don't ever want for somebody to walk in those doors, get interested in what's happening here, and then later discover that we're something completely other than they thought we were. First Baptist is not the church of the bait and switch. God has designed us with a specific identity for a specific reason, just as He has designed you with a specific identity for a specific reason. And just like you are able to accomplish far more when you work within the boundaries of who God has created you to be, your programming, if you will, we as a church will be able to accomplish far more together when we're working within the boundaries of the programming God has built into us. But for me to simply repeat that idea to you week after week after week, while important, it's not enough. An idea without an understanding is just a slogan, and we don't need a slogan as a church. We need an identity. So with all of this in mind, for the next 4 weeks, we're going to take our identity, we're going to break it down, and see if we can't gain a deeper, richer, fuller understanding of who God has designed us to be and how He's using that to advance His kingdom. And we're going to do this by taking a scripture-rooted deep dive into each of our 3 identity pieces: connecting, growing, reaching, And then the final week of the series, we'll do some looking and dreaming forward together as we try to wrap our hearts and minds around where God's taken us. That all brings us back to this morning. This morning, like I said, I want to think together about what it means that God has made us to be a people with whom anyone can connect. Now, if you've been around a little bit of time, you might notice that the language for that particular part of identity has changed a bit since when we first introduced it together a few years ago. When we first started embracing that, I told you that First Baptist is a place where anyone can connect. Now I regularly remind you that we are a people with whom anyone can connect. Why the change, especially since the other just kind of fills the mouth a bit more than the old one? Well, the basic idea is the same either way, but the second version, it communicates a bit more accurately what the church is. For far too long, like centuries,